Beyond Fear is my topic today. From 2006 until 2018 in our country, fear and anxiety was measured in scientific surveys to have doubled. That was up to 2018. And then what happened? Then we had the pandemic. The World Health Organization, in their studies worldwide, say that 25% of our world's population is seriously affected by anxiety. 25%. And I think that's underreported. Other scientific studies have shown that depression is at 28%, anxiety at 26%. I don't think this is news to anybody. I know that most of us feel some of that. I know during the pandemic, and we were in Northern California, and not all consecutively, but when you add it all up, there was 15 months of being sheltered in place. I'm a very social person. I'm a person who likes to interact. I like to get out into the world. And to be secluded. Now, there was my wife, and there were a couple of close friends, but pretty much secluded from other people other than on Zoom. And you know what I'm talking about. For 15 months was very, very difficult for me. For some of us, it may have led to some compulsive behaviors, overeating, over-medicating, over-drinking, whatever. I don't know how it affected you, but what I do know is that while we've talked about the pandemic of COVID-19, there is an insidious pandemic that has been going on, which is the pandemic of fear and anxiety. And it's affecting the mental health of many people. In particular, young people, teenagers, young adults, and women have been especially affected by this. So, getting beyond fear. On Halloween, I think part of the attraction of Halloween is that we can dress up as something sort of pseudo-scary. I mean, we've romanticized pirates. We've made them look kind of, Johnny Depp and Pirates of the Caribbean made pirates look kind of cool and flamboyant. And he said that he studied the motions and movements of Mick Jagger and incorporated those movements into playing Captain Jack Sparrow. So we gave pirates this sort of different feel. And people have asked me, are you a pirate or are you a motorcycle? Are you a biker? I said, yes. But part of the fun of Halloween is being able to step out of our normal role, play something different, and also, in some fun way, to face our fears. I'm sure, I don't know, but, before when I've gone down to Waikiki on Halloween night, have you ever done that? That's fun. And some of you went to Chinatown last night, was it? And, it's kind of a fun way to face our fears. I've wondered sometimes, why do people I don't like to watch horror movies myself, All I have to do is stop praying and stop meditating, and my life is a horror movie. I don't need anyone to produce it. I can produce it and direct it and write it on myself. Prayer and meditation has been my salvation. Okay? So in this time of Halloween, I think of it as a time where we are facing our fears, where we are facing some of those things that are scary to us. One of the things throughout the Hebrew and Christian scriptures that is said over and over and over is fear not, be not afraid. And, I can remember as a teenager reading this over and over, fear not, be not afraid. And I was so grateful that it said that. And I also wondered, why does it say that so often in Scripture? And I began to realize that the Bible is really a revelation of human consciousness, the evolution of human consciousness. That when you look at all aspects of the Scriptures, it is all talking about the development of our consciousness. And what is the message of God to us? Fear not, do not be afraid, I am with you. Joshua, who took over after Moses was gone, going into the promised land, was told, do not fear, be of strong courage, take courage, I am with you. And Jeremiah, who was called to be a prophet and was called to tell people things they did not want to hear and to make a life of telling people what they don't want to hear, was told, hey, you're going to be my spokesperson. And Jeremiah's like, I'm young. I don't even know how to speak. Why are you calling me? And God said, fear not, I will be with you. I will give you the words to say. Now, he was imprisoned. All kinds of things were done to him. But he was told, fear not. When Jesus was born and the angels showed up in the sky, and, the shepherds were all afraid, they said to them, fear not. After the resurrection of Jesus, and there was this angel at the tomb and all this, and the soldiers and disciples were afraid, the angel said, fear not. In Romans chapter 8, Paul said, if God be for us, who can be against us? If God be for us, who can be against us? Nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. In Psalms chapter 139, it said, if I go into the depths of the grave, you are there. If I go into the heights of heaven, you are there. Wherever I am, God is. And that was said 2,800 years ago. Wherever I am, God is. We didn't just dream this stuff up. This is a deep spiritual principle that Unity has grasped. Yesterday, or a couple days before, I was at the gym, signed up at the gym, and was talking with someone who is assessing me and looking at coaching and stuff like this. And, he wanted to find out about what I do. And I told him, what I do. And, we talked about how we're both coaches. I'm a spiritual coach, and he's a coach to people's physical bodies, and that we need to treat the whole thing, the body, the mind, the spirit. And as I thought about, what I do for a living, he asked me, well, tell me about Unity. What makes Unity different from other churches? And I'm thinking, I'm so glad you asked. And we love all churches. We embrace it all. But I said, well, one thing that might be different about Unity is that our discipline, our path, is to recognize God living as us and living as each person. that when we see each person, we are looking at the presence of God. When we look at each circumstance, we are looking at the presence of God. Whatever situation is coming up in our lives, our challenge, our discipline is to see the presence of God in that, to see God in everything, and to help others to see that as well. He's like, whoa, I don't know what your elevator speech is. You might think of one when someone asked you about what does unity teach, and you might say, well, no one asked me what unity teaches. Maybe that's because you don't tell them you go to unity. Maybe that's because you keep it under wraps, incognito. I remember first time I came to a unity church, I sat towards the back. I was a minister in the Church of the Nazarene, which I love dearly, and my mom's watching. And I sat in the back, and I kind of slumped down, and I thought, I hope no one notices that I'm a minister. I hope they don't ask me to get involved in stuff. I just want to observe. I just want to soak it in. I just want to be in receivership. I've been in ownership. I've gone that leadership route. I just want to soak it up and relax. Can you relate? That lasted about 3 weeks. Because pretty soon I wanted to get involved. Pretty soon people started noticing and they started talking with me, and pretty soon I was getting involved. And when I got involved, I really, really started to grow spiritually. If you're into receivership and being fed and growing spiritually, I have great news for you. It's not by just sitting back, it's by getting involved, stepping into ownership in the spiritual community, taking some responsibility. That's how we grow spiritually and connect deeper with other people. It's not an either-or thing. They go together. So, getting beyond fear. Wow, just think of what things you might be afraid of in your life. Think of some of the tough things that you've faced in your life, that you've had to face in spite of your fears. Have you ever had to say something or do something that you were scared to do, but you stood in your strength and you did it anyway? Because you knew it was the right thing to do. Maybe it was when a friend of yours uttered some racial slur and you called them on it. Maybe it's when you have a talk with your family and let them know that you are gay or that you've really never related as male or female. Those are challenging conversations. Have some of you done that? Maybe it's when you need to go to your boss and say, I love working here, and I love working for you, and I believe in the mission of this particular job, and it's been 5 years since I've gotten a raise, and I believe it's time that I get a raise. Maybe for you commitment phobes, it's being willing to commit to a relationship or commit to a church or to commit to an organization that you believe in. What is your fear? We all have them. Oh my goodness, we have them. And some people, and it's fine, just give free rein to them. I've been with people who are like, maybe we're on a tour of something, we're on a tall building, and I look out over the ledge and I'm like, hey, come here, look. They're like, no, I'm all right, I'm okay. No, it's really, no. Mm-mm. What is your fear? I think of two big fears. There's more, but there's two big fears. One is the fear of death. People are afraid of that. A lot of people don't like to go to funerals or hospitals because it reminds them of it. A lot of people are afraid of death. Another big fear is a lot of people are afraid of life. Well, that kind of sucks, doesn't it? Because you're one or the other. Of being really alive, of being fully who you are, of really letting your light shine. Some people are afraid to be fully alive. Which is it for you? Are you afraid to be fully who you are, to really embrace it and celebrate it? I find that some of those people who are really afraid of death are those who are afraid to really live. People who've lived fully, they don't have regrets. I have a slide, I hope we have it. This is the 74th verse of the Tao Te Ching. I've studied the Tao Te Ching for about 35 years and continue to study it. I have a Tao buddy in North Marin, Heishe. And so this is the 74th verse. If you realize that all things change, okay? Would you recognize that? That all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to. If you aren't afraid of dying, there is nothing you can't achieve. Trying to control the future is like trying to take the master carpenter's place. When you handle the master carpenter's tools, chances are that you'll cut your hand. What that is saying is, we try to control life, and sometimes by trying to predict and control what happens, trying to predict and control others, by trying to predict and control the circumstances around us, we're meddling out here and we're interfering with what's wanting to emerge, with what's wanting to come forth. And so it refers to the master carpenter, and be careful that you don't cut yourself on the master carpenter's tools, because we try to interfere with what's wanting to emerge in other people's lives. And instead of working with it and recognizing it, we try to fight it and predict it and control it. And, you know, the ego does that. I'm not putting down the ego. We all have an ego. But the question is the ego in the car or is it driving the car? I took away the ego's driver's license. Now, once in a while, I may nod off and I'll find the ego at the driver's wheel, and it's like, nope, your license got revoked, get out of the way, so I can recognize it. Fear is often resistance to that which is out of our control. Fear is the refusal to accept what is. Fear is resisting what is wanting to emerge instead of embracing it. So what do we do with fear? One of the things I do with it is embrace it. Now that sounds counterintuitive. But how can I release something unless I am first holding it? If I'm suppressing it, if I'm pushing it down, if I'm pretending that it doesn't exist, then it's coming out in very odd ways, sideways. This is part of why we do the quantum living process in this spiritual community. And I hope we have another quantum living process class soon, because it's real important to deal with our shadow side, our fears, our anger, our resentments, whatever that might be. It's important for me to first own it and see what it is so that I can then begin to release it. Now, how do I release it? I release it by understanding who I've come here to be. I release it by focusing on the presence that God is, just as that reading from Discover the Power Within You. That as we focus on the presence of God living itself as us, what can we be afraid of? If we are focused on the all-powerful, all-livingness, all-lovingness presence of God living as us, what could we be afraid of? Actually, nothing. You might be afraid of rejection, but if we're centered in that God presence, we're not afraid of anything, because God's not afraid of anything. If we're living as that self-livingness, if we're aligned with that, that's why in 1 John chapter 4, it says, perfect love casts out all fear. If we're aligned with that love, if we're aligned with that presence, and yeah, I know that there's those fears of rejection, those fears of not being enough, those fears of being made fun of, those fears of lack, those fears of who knows what. But when we are aligned in that presence, that absolute that God is, there is no fear in God. Do you recognize that? Do you know that? There's no fear in God. Hate and love are not opposites. Fear and love. Fear is the absence of love. You know, I talked about light. Light has substance. Darkness has no substance. Darkness is nothing but the absence of light. In the same way, fear is nothing but the absence of pure love. Fear is nothing but the absence of pure love. Knowing that love within ourselves, loving ourselves as we really are, knowing that loving alignment with the presence that God is. Some of you have heard this acronym for fear, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. We get caught up in the movie. We get caught up thinking that it's real, but it's not. Have you ever discovered that when you're watching maybe a beautiful sunset over the ocean and you're waiting for that green spot to appear? Do you notice how your fear is being alleviated? Have you noticed when you get into a love relationship, how your fears seem to dissipate? Have you noticed when you really go deeply into the love that God is, that fear dissipates? There is no room for fear when we are absolutely in love. So, have a great Halloween. Dress up scary if you want. Go without prayer or meditation. That'll be scary enough. And you might wonder why I say that. Prayer and meditation is my life. It's not part of my life. It is my life. So, if you're experiencing fear and anxiety in your life, what are some of the tools that you're using to deal with it? One of the things I want to recommend is the class I'll be teaching November 8th, and I'll be teaching it for 4 Tuesday nights from 6 p.m. to 8:30, and it's Discover the Power Within You. And we're using the book by Eric Butterworth, but we're using some other materials also. It's an experiential class where you can come here and really experience yourself as the presence of God. And when you discover yourself as the presence of God, there's no room for fear. I invite you to take a deep breath. Whatever it is we've been afraid of, we gently release. We let go as we embrace the presence that God is. The presence that God is, living as us. We are here to embrace that, to discover that, to live that presence. And as we do so, fear dissipates. And let us breathe into that as we go into the silence.